What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where, as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above. No real big changes to our watch list. We will continue to take a peek at Apecoin as well as Shiba. I've just added it to the bottom of our watch list because it is sitting on critical support as of right now. And if that happens to break down, I think it's kind of, the end of the world for Shiba, in my personal estimation. So we'll check in on that chart closer towards the end of the video, but nonetheless, kicking things off here on our Bitcoin daily time frame, some pretty significant developments. Obviously, we're breaking down underneath this flush point that we discussed in last week's video, but for now, what's really capturing my attention is the follow through to the bottom end of the daily range that we've been stuck in now ever since 2022 started. So if we can truly come into this 34,350 mark, to me, it's certainly reasonable to start shifting our bias towards longs, noting that Bitcoin has really done nothing. It's been completely sideways here. There's no reason to think that it wouldn't bounce off of the yearly support and the range low that we've been trading in, again, since 2022 started. So that's my first sort of thought. The only thing that's throwing a little bit of a wrench in that sort of thinking here is the fact that we're actually already starting to print a hammer candle and some lower wicks on the prior day's bar as well as today's bar. So if it doesn't quite make it all the way to that 34,350 mark, then to me, maybe that's a little bit of a sign of relative strength, just in the sense that it's not all the way at the true area of support. It's trying to find a higher low. But the way you would play that, if it doesn't quite make it all the way to the 34,350, is long over the hammer high. For you really aggressive traders, you're looking for at least a back test of the breakdown point, right? And then from there, you've got to make the trade worth it by monitoring for continuation into roughly 40K. The more conservative trader who wants to wait for a more structural bottom down here, if we don't quite make it to that 34,350, would be something like this, a higher low that then recaptures the flush point. Okay, then you can either get it long here on the pullback or a break of that high for, again, continuation. For that type of trade to be worth it from a risk reward standpoint, you would really need to start targeting this next level around 42,200, if not just the top end of the daily range, up there around 45,800. All right, so those are the two long sort of thoughts here. And obviously the bearish thought would be, okay, if we come down here and we just get bearish consolidation, put in like something like a bear flag down here, obviously that shifts the tone. And it currently doesn't look like that's the play because of these lower wicks, but it could potentially happen. There are still technically 6 hours and 40 minutes until this daily bar closes. So if we do get a nasty red close and we just start hovering down here, that's, again, probably the more hands-off scenario where we form a bear flag. And if 34,350 breaks, we know there's quite a ways to fall into 30K Bitcoin. Again, it doesn't look like the current sort of outlook, given what we have and what we know about the yearly chart, just kind of playing nicely in this overall range. So again, not a top priority to see the chart break down from there, but it is a backup scenario that you can keep in your back pocket if we start to violate that 34,350. So overall thoughts in Bitcoin kind of getting interesting here at the bottom end of the daily range. Let's continue along and get into Ethereum. Ethereum's interesting as well because it has broken its support trend line. Remember that it was relatively strong to Bitcoin because it continuously produced the higher lows. Clearly, that's been violated now, and the resistance trend line is really what you want to be watching. So let's go ahead and remove that together. No longer really in play. Just like Bitcoin, though, starting to get some lower wicks here right at this shelf of support. If I just kind of make this a little bit bigger, might be easier to see here. So what you're watching for is pretty much the same thing. I would say the more conservative trade is not really the higher low above here inside of Ethereum, but instead the break of the resistance trend line to get to here. And you're kind of playing for that filling up the triangle move up into a roughly $3,000 per coin, right? That's clearly the last big place where we did run into some sellers. So in Ethereum, it's either, again, long over the highs for the really aggressive trader, targeting that, or for the more conservative trader, potentially a break of the resistance trend line, or even more conservative, a higher low back above 3,000 for the better indication that we truly are going to reverse and find a bottom here closer to that 2564. For you bears out there, obviously you just want to see this do something like this, stuff at the resistance trend line, and if we were to reattempt this, then obviously it's kind of on for shorts, looking for that breakdown into 2310. All right, so all of these charts are, we've only looked at two so far, but the two we have looked at are coming into some pretty decent inflection points here, and it is worth watching in our crypto marketplace with the broad market in equities kind of feeling some pain with all of the FOMC news and inflation, obviously, that's been going on. It'll be interesting to certainly observe how the crypto markets respond to that type of information. Nonetheless, continuing along here with Binance Coin, what do we see in BNB? Just going to give you some perspective by scrunching up the chart. Again, this is kind of the equivalent to the 2022 range. We're off of the lows here, but we do have a resistance trend line in place. We are starting to print a little bit of a hammer. We have equal lows here. The better long is just waiting for a break of this resistance trend line. Again, even if you take it long here, there's possibility that we stuff at the trend line for a lower high and then just continuation into 357.90. So if you are looking to play this long, it's got to be a break of the resistance trend line or just a higher low back above roughly 393, right? So you're either getting it here or again, the break of this for continuation into 423.50s. To the downside, again, if you're skeptical here and you really think that, we're moving all the way to the bottom end of the yearly range, which is closer to that 335, then fine, just be patient here and wait for the back test before that rollover. Again, the hammer in the short term, like very short term, the next couple of either day or 2 days does potentially have me thinking it is going to come into at least that resistance trend line for some sort of test. You could just start to think of this as an overall down channel. We're bouncing off the bottom, come up to the top, so on and so forth. So I do think we're at least headed to here, but from there, that's your inflection point. Do we break and start to rally back up towards that level we just discussed, or do we stuff and then come in for a new lower low at 357, 358? Next up, Cardano. What do we see here? Big rejection off the pump that we saw on Wednesday, right? So nonetheless, it's still under $1. It's, big rejection here at the prior breakdown point. We're sitting on these lows around 75, 77-ish cents. Doesn't look good in Cardano. I wouldn't really be fishing for longs here until it can prove something that looks like this. Anything that does chop around in here, in my estimation, is exactly that. It's just chop. Doesn't strike me as a clean trader. The obvious short is underneath that 75, 77-ish cent mark to get into, as we were discussing in many videos now, that 41 cent, 40-ish cent mark. So do be mindful that there is a lot of poor structure underneath us in this section of the chart right here. And if this does break, it can continue to get nasty here for Cardano. ADA and longs, again, just aren't even looking impressive at this point in time. Next up, we have Solana. What's going on here? Sitting on the flush point, right? So this one is clearly exhibiting high, lower high here on the rejection of the breakdown point. Sure, it's trying to hammer out a little bit on today's candlestick here. Again, depending on how this closes will inform the decision. If it closes as a solid red-bodied bar, I would be looking for lower here inside of Solana into roughly 66.14, coming from, if we scrunch it up, the first pullback after really sort of breaking out and making a significant move in the past, the latter half of 2021. So nonetheless, again, this is your critical inflection point, 83. How does it resolve? If we do print a hammer here, even if you want to classify this as a double bottom, where's your neckline, right? Your neckline break is technically up and over 94.63. And from there, you could start to target in here, 108, so on and so forth. Currently it doesn't feel like it's in play immediately into the next couple of days. If it does close as a solid red bar, again, we talked about downside target here, 66.14. Next up, we've got Polkadot. Again, big break, retest, and failure. The look is for lower here, trying to form a bit of a hammer. But again, if it's going to turn into a double bottom, you still got a long way to go before that neckline activates it back to the upside. Your support is coming in, if I pop this on auto, at 1278 from this shelf in here. And then again at 1059. Again, to me, just not really, it was looking like a decent trader in here, but now it's kind of off my radar now that it's just dribbling slowly lower into sort of no man's land. So not really that attractive for long setups here inside of Polkadot. Next up, Crypto.com coin. Again, same sort of deal here. This is still kind of a sentiment indicator in my estimation. We talked about this many moons ago on the channel, remembering that people go to Crypto.com coin just like they would Coinbase or they would Binance, and then they convert into other potentially small project coins. And to see this completely falling off of a cliff back down to ICO open lows, it again just doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence in the entire crypto space as of right now. So I'm not really seeing this as a healthy development for the overall crypto marketplace. The current chart look would be for lower as some sort of bear flag is developing down here. Anything that still consolidates underneath 32 cents strikes me as bearish. If we start to take out these highs, 32 cent-ish area, there could be the potential for a little bit of a squeeze through this thin structure. But even then, what are you going to trade for 5 cents up into 37? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there are many more lucrative opportunities out there instead of trying to catch, quote unquote, this falling knife. So just not a very promising look, right? Matic USD, same idea. If this will be a double bottom, neckline is going to be at 116. From there, you can look left, thin structure until you get the back test of this larger breakdown point at 134. To the downside, if this truly turns into a bear flag, which is the primary way of looking at the chart currently, noting we are in a strong downtrend. What do we have for supports underneath us? We haven't mapped anything out, so let's go ahead and do that together. Really, it just strikes me that 70 cents could be up next. Maybe there's something at the psychological $1 mark, which we're kind of sitting on. So if that starts to break, I just would watch out to the downside. Again, you're looking at a 30% loss if you're trying to take a long at a buck and it moves to 70 cents. Again, not to insult anyone's intelligence, but 30% could be, taken from you quite quickly if we start breaking down underneath this shelf of support here. For longs, we covered 116 as the neckline there, so let's not harp on that. Luna, what do we see in this one? Head and Shoulders is coming out full force, right? We were alluding to this possibility in the prior video, and there you go, right? Here it is in full force. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder, neckline is clearly defined at 77 bucks. So if this gets taken out, look out below. Again, look left here. Very thin structure. Neckline breakout, support trend line is your saving grace, and that's at 64. So about a 10 plus-ish move to the downside, right? So definitely looks like a decent opportunity for a short here inside of Luna. Also noting that baked into this sort of right shoulder here, we have the 100% retracement, we have a lower high, and we have an equal low in short proximity of time. If you've been watching the channel for any period of time, you basically know that this is not a short on the 100% retracement, but if you can put in another lower high, an equal low reattempt, that's where it gets much more attractive for a serious follow-through move to the downside, especially in the context of this overall pattern right here. Definitely looks like if 77 goes in Luna, kiss this thing goodbye into the support trend line. That would be my thought at least. So Luna looking pretty good for shorts. For longs, it's got to be back up and over this 94.70. Doesn't look like a good look currently, noting again that we already have a well-defined lower high here inside of Luna. Next up, Mana USD. Continues to look horrible, but just keeping tabs on it from a sort of metaverse play perspective. Nothing about this catches my eye or says, hey, let's go long Mana. It's, again, if you think this is a double bottom, fine. Your neckline's still at 170. We're not currently at it. We're just chopping right through some of this prior support, so let's just get rid of that, and we'll put in the neckline instead, which again is close to 167, 170. To the downside, breakdowns underneath the double bottom lows currently at 138, bring us into roughly $1.07 coming from resistance, and then obviously it was off to the races here early November of last year. So nonetheless, it just doesn't look attractive for longs whatsoever at this point in time. I would continue to watch for lower and maybe a more meaningful bottom comes from this level around $1 even too as well, just from a psychological standpoint. But for now, it wouldn't be my first choice to start thinking about longs here in Mana. Next up, AVAX, same idea. I know this stuff can get kind of repetitive, guys, so hopefully, you're just here for the levels and potentially learning some charting tools, tips and tricks. Nonetheless, repetition is always good for that type of learning. In AVAX, same deal. Double bottom neckline's way up above. It's also a back test of this area here around 65. Doesn't strike me as a potentially in play look for the weekend, maybe next week if some things change here. But currently not the primary objective. Instead, any consolidation that happens down here strikes me as bear flag. And then from there, we're looking for breakdowns of 54 to get us into this support from in here, which is well defined around $40 even. So look for lower in this one. And obviously the trend in the short term is certainly down, even more so than our primary support trend line. We have a secondary, which is much steeper. Next, let's get into some of these interesting ones. Apecoin is the first one up on the docket here. In last week's video, we were actually talking about, is it a buy on the pullback here? And it actually did work out for a quick scalp up towards those highs. But nonetheless, look at what's unfolded here. We're back down underneath this breakout point around the 17 mark that we discussed in last week's video with a break, retest, and now we're headed back lower. In my estimation, it's probably coming back down closer to 10. In this range, I wouldn't look to be overly active. It doesn't strike me as something that's going to trade cleanly through here. Notice what happens here, just drifting, and then as volume picks up, it kind of has some footing to it. But if volume's tapering off, which it does currently look like it's doing, I would look to not be active in this range. Obviously, breakdowns of that 1050 get really nasty for a move back down through the thin structure when it came out as a new coin. That's not a good look. And if it can break back up above that 17 level, that might be a little bit more interesting, noting that it's sort of on a smaller time frame. Let's actually just look at it potentially on a 4 hour. Yeah, here we go. So if you were to look at this as like a head and shoulders, if we were to get back above that 17, it's eliminating the shoulders, right? So that's a good positive step in the right direction. But, currently based on the daily, wouldn't be my first thought that that's just immediately going to be in play for something that does this. So if you are going to try to play it long, watch out for a scenario like I've just drawn in with the white line, but wouldn't be my first thought as of right now. And then lastly, Shiba, you'll notice it's sitting on an all-important area of support. If this breaks down, kind of kiss this thing goodbye. Notice in this area, when it first kind of came into popularity, it was the first major bull flag that was put in right here. From there, we've come down, we've tested it, we've grinded against it, didn't break down, a little fake pop, a little fake enthusiasm in the name. And now we're sitting right back down on it. I mean, we clearly have lower highs coming into it. Just not a good look here inside of Shiba. So just wanted to point out, how critical this support is. And if it breaks down, all of these, just everybody who was late to the party here, major disappointments. Not that they're not already disappointed, because I'm sure if you just look at the volume graph, right, many people were transacting in these stages of the chart here. Already these guys, massive losses, and this one already starting to become massive losses, right? If you're still holding on to this, I hope that some of those people took profit in here, but nonetheless, looking forward, a breakdown of this 1936, and there's 4 zeros before that, by the way, does get nasty all the way, I would say, just back down to the lows, right? And that's going to be 5 zeros, 668, all right? So absolutely nasty move available here inside of Shiba if this monumental support breaks down. And that's going to wrap up the video. If you enjoyed it this week, let me know in the comment section or by giving the video a thumbs up. Don't forget that the weekly watch list video will be coming out on Sunday as scheduled. And with all of that being said, I wish you a green trading week.